I'm here with Neville Parsons, who is the senior lawyer here at Donovan Oates Hannaford in Port Macquarie, as we wanted to talk to him about some recent changes that are affecting the real estate industry. Welcome, Neville.
Yeah, thanks, Sue. It's great to be here, and it's great to be able to talk about the changes that have already been in place for some time, but will have a major change in the next couple of weeks.
What is E-Conveyancing?
Yeah, E-Conveyancing, just the description that the New South Wales Registrar General, the Land Registry services, put on their transformation that's been occurring in the last 10 years on how they handle dealings involving land.
And by 100% E-Conveyancing, when is that coming in?
Yeah, well, the cessation day, as they call it, is Monday, the 11th of October. And on that day, all dealings that are dealt with by the Land Registry will be non-paper based. They'll be all online, they'll be all digital. Just to put some context around that, the e-conveyancing journey, which as I said has been going for about 10 years, at the outset, the Land Registry Service were handling something in the order of 10,000 paper dealings a day. Currently, that's down to somewhere between 500 and 1,000. Come Monday, the 11th of October, that'll be zero.
So what does that mean to the homeowner today?
One of the most common questions that I'm getting at the moment is the major change is that there's no need for a certificate of title anymore. So the aspect that was deemed to be the record of your ownership of the property, the certificate of title, is no longer going to be of value, no longer going to be needed in a conveyancing transaction. It is the register that New South Wales Registrar General holds, the Land Register, that will determine the ownership of property.
So with regard to the proof of ownership, from the 11th of October when this comes in, how do they go about proving that?
Well, the Land Register in New South Wales is the sole source of truth for land ownership. Mm-hmm. And that being the case, that's why it's so critical to not only identify through a title search how and what appears on the Land Register, but making sure that the person you're acting for as the owner is in fact the owner. And that's done through the identification requirements. Mm-hmm. Driver's licence, passport, rate notice, Medicare.
So with a lot of people that are holding on to that certificate of title, some people don't know where they even are at the moment.
Yes.
How have you dealt with those clients?
Well, in the past, and up until the 11th of October, then the certificate of title, although not physically part of the settlement transaction and hasn't been for some time in the e-conveyancing world, then the certificate of title was a means of identifying that the person was the right to deal with that property. Come the 11th of October, the certificate of title is no different to maybe a university degree certificate, a wedding photo. It's a piece of property, but it no longer is an indication that you own the property. And in fact, on the 11th of October, certificates of title, as far as being a concept or a proof of ownership of property, is no longer a legal document.
So do you have a safe with a lot of certificate of titles at Donovan Oates Hannaford?
We certainly do, and the interesting part of that is that even though the certificate of title in terms of that legal document no longer exists come the 11th of October, that particular piece of paper is a bit of personal property. So it is our client's property. So the challenge for law firms all around New South Wales is, what do we do with them? And obviously, because it's not ours, we're holding it on behalf of a client, then we would need the client's authority to manage that. Some law firms, as I understand it, are going to be sending them out to their clients and say, this is your certificate of title. It no longer has value as a legal document. You may want it in terms of being evidence of a piece of history or memorabilia. If that's the case, then by all means, here it is. Otherwise, you can instruct us and we will shred it because it has no legal value come the 11th of October. I'm aware that people have actually framed them. And some of the certificates of title are very, very old in their format, and they are a very piece of history for properties. And I think we'll see a lot of people that potentially might say, I want to frame it because it's a reflection of a point in time showing my ownership of this property, even though it's no longer a legal document confirming ownership.
This building is heritage at Bell Property, and we have a picture framed of the certificate of title here, just as a relation of the wonderful history of this region.
Yes.
And I think that's a really lovely thing to do. They've also done some canvases that are framed, and although it isn't of value per se in your field now that you need it, but it's a great historical piece to showcase in your home.
Yeah, and the other major change too is that I guess over time the majority of people have potentially had a mortgage when they bought their place, and traditionally when you paid out your mortgage, the bank would release back to you your certificate of title.
Yes.
And that was often seen as a big celebratory point, and you know, reasons to celebrate on the basis I've paid my mortgage off, I've now got my certificate of title. That will no longer happen. Because the bank doesn't even have, we can still have champagne, but the bank doesn't even have a document. And even if they did, it is of no value come the 11th of October.
Wow, big changes.
Yes.
So Neville, what protections against fraud do you have as the rightful owner of the property?
The major protection is that as the rightful owner, the sole source of truth of ownership is the Land Register, and the New South Wales Government guarantees your right to that property as the registered owner. So in terms of if there ever happened to be a fraud, and a lot of people have asked that where it's totally in a digital environment, there are a lot of scams we know around the digital world, but if you're the rightful owner and something did happen, then New South Wales Government guarantees your ownership and protects you. The onus is on the person acting for the owner of the property. So in the majority of cases, that's a lawyer or a conveyancer. The onus is on them to identify the person that's on the register as the owner as being the same person that they are acting for in the transaction. So it's around identifying your client. It's around identifying through the means of the normal identification process, driver's license, passport, Medicare card. But in terms of land, it's also recommended to get a copy of the rate notice.
Yes.
Because the rate notice itself is going to tie that individual to the same person that's registered on the title. So there's a step that's on the onus now well, it's already been there for a fair while, the need to identify your client. But in 100% E-Conveyancing, it is mandatory that identification and having the authority to act and deal for that person is the fundamental safeguard. One of the interesting things in a prior vocation, when I was working at the credit union, we would often have forums where you'd be invited and hear guest speakers. And we had the head of the New South Wales Fraud Squad one day talking to us, and it was around mortgage fraud. And this is in the prior environment where the CT was the critical piece. And he told the story where this couple in a eastern suburbs unit worth quite a few $1 million were having breakfast one Saturday morning. A knock on the door, and the removalists were at the door to move in the new owner's furniture. Their ID had been scammed. They were able, through the scamming of, I guess, driver's license and those things, go to the Registrar General and say, I'm the owner of this property, I've lost my CT. And they issued a new CT. Two things, under the 100% E-Conveyancing, the Registrar General will obviously be no longer issuing CTs because they're no longer required. So the onus of making sure who we as lawyers or conveyancers are acting for in the sale of a property falls on us to make sure we've satisfied ourselves of your identity, and similarly satisfy ourselves through the rate notice that the person we've identified is one and the same name as the person on the register when we do a title search. The safeguard at the end of the day should, through all of that, New South Wales Government guarantees the registered owner that's on the land register as the rightful owner and would underwrite and make good any loss.
That's reassuring after what's been happening in the past.
Yes.
What a shock that would have been at Eastern Suburbs Unit.
There are many stories we've heard of that in the past as well. So it's like anything in a digital world, and the transformational world is your own ID and the protections you put around maintaining the security of your ID is fundamental. And as I mentioned earlier, then the transformation to digital in systems similar to land dealings have been there in the past. So the share trading, also the banking and finance world where, checks and cash, well, very few checks today. And I think that this is just a sign of the times.
Well, I was saying earlier, when we bought our home here in Port Macquarie, at the time of settlement, we had 13 different checks that had to be issued, and the ridiculous waste of time for everyone processing little bits of paper.
Yeah.
It's reassuring that it's now going all digital.
Yes.
But I think one thing at the moment we're finding is it's an education process of how you're selling your home. So we have people that are obviously in lockdown during COVID, that have relatives or family members that have had to actually move into aged care facilities or sadly passed away. And we're trying to do that all now, whilst they're in WA and Queensland, sell the property, which can be achieved by actually the whole DocuSign digital platform. So that's been very, I think a lot of our clients are not aware of that, that you can actually still sell a property and not physically have to come into my office and sign the paperwork that's necessary.
Each person acting, so whether it be a conveyancer, a lawyer, or if it's an incoming mortgagee, then the bank, all have to be a member of an electronic organisation that connects with the Land Registry.
Correct.
That's a critical part, and if you're a member of that, then you have the obligations of satisfying yourself as to the identification.
But just to reassure all of our clients that it's very much protected, and the way we're moving forward in the next few ways of doing business digitally.
Yes, it certainly is. And just remember that that certificate of title becomes nothing more than a piece of paper. It might have some personal, historical importance to you, but it will no longer be required as part of a land transaction come Monday the 11th of October.
So if you'd like some more information, we've got that information in a document provided by Donovan Oates Hannaford. So we'd love to share that on our website for you. So please let us know if you have any questions. But thank you again, Neville, for being part of this information session today for the new way we're doing business.
Glad to be here, and as I say, it's all part of this digital journey that most businesses are going through and being part of.
Yeah, fantastic.
Thank you.